Welcome to the Lone Star Keto Podcast. I'm your host, Amber. My vision for this podcast is to showcase experts in the keto carnivore community, as well as those who have compelling stories that inspire and give others hope. My wish is that no one has to suffer like I did. If you find value in this podcast, please consider subscribing and hitting that notification button. And as always, feel free to share. Thank you so much for your support. Hi, I'm Amber, and welcome to the Lone Star Keto Podcast. And today we have a special guest with us, Jeanette Louise. She is an ex-bodybuilder. She is a carnivore and an intermittent fasting enthusiast, and a huntress and a conservationist, which I think is super cool. And I'm dedicating this episode to my son because he has been asking for something along this line. So welcome, Jeanette.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's awesome. Okay, so to start with, let's get a little bit of your background. Let's talk about how you found your way to the carnivore diet. And within that, I want to hear a little bit about your bodybuilding and how that whole process really played into some of your issues.
So from the time that I was 21 was when I first was introduced to dieting. And I think that that's probably the first time I realized that I associated food with weight. Because before that, I didn't have a weight problem. I never did until I started dieting. So, my association with food completely transformed, and then it just became this food was about calories in, calories out. What type of foods I'm eating. Gym goals. It's just very, very interesting how, up until I had started dieting, I never actually had a weight problem. So fast forward, many, many years of attempting to step on stage and, hit these goals, but I'd stayed disciplined for a long time. But for me, during this process, I felt that it was just very unsustainable. And then in 2011, I had actually started a new journey and finally found a coach that was extremely no nonsense. And in his world, there are no cheat days, cheat meals. There's no cheat anything. Like if you're going to train with him, you're in it for the long haul. Like you have to stay completely disciplined. And I went from around 165 pounds down to 130 pounds in a very short amount of time. And that was a complete shock to my system. And it was a lot of time training and a lot of time prepping. And my diet was horrible. I mean, I felt better, especially as I was getting stronger because I was getting very strong and very lean and my body was changing, even though my mind hadn't really caught up to the changes in my body. But, it was, you really have to be consistent when your goal is to step on a stage. So I finally hit my goal in April 2012, and I stepped on stage at 15% body fat, and I was 130 pounds. That was my first competition, and it was a blast. It was such a blast. I mean, I felt like that was so many years in the making that, I finally said, girl, you got it. You can do this. If you just train hard and do what you're told, you can get there. And so it was so funny because my first competition, I'm backstage with all these girls and they're they look so beautiful, and just these really gorgeous physiques and beauty. They all have their hair and makeup done, and I had my hair and makeup done too, and I'm just smiling and I'm waiting. I'm not even nervous at all, and a lot of them are back there and they're crying and they're so nervous, and I'm like, you're gonna mess up your makeup. Like you're tanned and you're not supposed to get wet, and you got all your makeup professionally done. You're gonna mess that all up. It was interesting. But I don't know, that day for me was just such a day that the only thing I could associate with stepping on stage was joy. I knew that I knew that I did not produce the physique that a majority of these women have. That would, definitely place, but that really wasn't my intention. I was just happy I got there, and that I was considered, stage worthy, and that I could walk out with confidence, and that I had a really good coach that had my back, that, even though he thought that I was cheating because I wasn't losing the weight that he had expected me to. But again, this is years of metabolic damage and yo-yo dieting, that it took such discipline and really hard work for me, because I didn't grow into my physique. I had to shrink into my physique because I'm considered a transformation. And there's a lot that's involved mentally to get there, and I believe that almost anybody can get there. But I think the true the true results are, how long can you sustain that? Can you keep that? Is that your lifestyle? And for me, like, I never imagined myself. I never wanted to go pro. I didn't want to spend all my days in the gym. I just wanted to get there. I just wanted to see what it felt like. And I also think on some level, I felt like having the body that I desired would have made me a happier person.
Yeah.
That it would have somehow fixed my life's problems if I just had the body that, like, that's so
Oh,
funny.
I do.
How we lie to ourselves that way. And while it opened up some doors for me, it really showed me that it does not, at the end of the day, like, you have to be happy internally. Otherwise, you can easily sabotage all the things that are external. And it really truly comes down to what's going on the inside.
That's absolutely
and
correct.
the transformation on the inside, yes. So I competed again a year later, and that competition, I actually placed in the top 15, but you only place in the top 5. I just happened to make the 15th, and after the 15th, like, you don't even make it on the board. You're like not even existent. But I was just so happy because I was in the class that I'm in. That's the most average class. So of course there was like 150 girls. So to feel like I actually got a placement was really, really awesome. And so I had stepped on stage at 11% body fat, and I weighed 122 pounds. And, I had a lot more time to build more muscle, and I was taking some collagen supplements. And I felt like my body was actually really starting to thrive physically. But during that phase of before I stepped on stage, I had gone through, I was hospitalized twice for dehydration. When I was there between prejudging and finals, I was having really, really bad panic attacks. I'd have to leave the auditorium and go find kind of a quiet, small room and just kind of breathe. And I didn't know what was really happening to me. So post competition, I had a huge crash. And while I had attained some amazing physical goals, my health really declined, and it declined quickly, unfortunately, and I killed my adrenals. So my stress literally went from 0 to 100. I had a lot of anxiety, a lot of panic attacks. I remember I was moving to Colorado because I was living in Southern California at the time. And my friends were getting ready to come pick me up, and I started having this really, really bad panic attack before they got there. And I had to sit in the closet, and just kind of talk myself through this because the anxiety got so bad. And when you have something like that happen, and without really an awareness of it, your brain's trying to make sense of what's happening and why is it happening. So you have the anxiety, but then when you don't realize why this is happening, that puts in a whole new level of fear. So I basically, told my coach what was going on, and he was, you need to just back off for a while, eat more fats, don't train so hard. And so I did. I basically backed off, and then I moved back to Washington a few months later. And I think I mentioned this in the other videos. That's when I put down the fork or put down the weights and picked up the fork. And quickly, within, I'd say probably 2 years, I put 60 pounds on in 2 years. It was quick. Yes,
Wow.
it was. And I think that ultimately that's because the lifestyle itself was just about depriving myself of sugars, depriving myself of fats. And so when I rebounded, my brain just went into this frenzy, and it was sugar, 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 sugar all the time. It was a really bad addiction. And when I first started, dating my boyfriend, he, bless his heart, I could weigh 130 pounds, I could weigh 230 pounds. He still loves me for me. And as he's seeing what's going on with my sugar addiction, he's like, your blood is solid sugar. I think you actually have a sugar addiction. And I'm like, well, probably, but I mean, oh well. and that was a really unfortunate, place, because going from restricting and associating so many negative feelings to restricting, to feeling the freedoms again to satisfy and get that dopamine release eating the sugar. And it wasn't just, when I wanted to eat it, it was like all day long chasing that dopamine rush from eating sugar. And I'd wake up in the morning and I'd eat sugar, and throughout the day I'd drink sugar and eat sugar, and at nighttime I'd have more sugar. So, yeah.
Goodness. Okay, so when you recognized you were having all these issues and you started down the path to realizing that you didn't need the carbs, the vegetables, the etc., and you started eating a more meat-based diet, go over some things that improved. How long have you been eating that with carnivore?
Okay, so I kind of want to back up to keto real quick, because I had tried, when I knew that I needed to lose that weight again, I knew that there's no way I could ever go back to a competitor's diet. It was just in my mind, absolutely not. Mm-hmm. And so I had found keto, and I thought, this is great. Even though it went completely against everything that I had known that you could lose weight from, I was eating a lot more fats, but I was losing some weight until I hit a set point. And then I kind of went back. And so I went back. So I gained more weight, and then I went back on keto, and then I lost a little bit more weight. But I could never break through the set point until I started incorporating intermittent fasting. And in April of 2017, I had actually weighed my heaviest at 191 pounds. Oh. And so I started with keto, and then I started incorporating intermittent fasting, and it was gradual. And then I was able to fast for long periods of time. I had done some extended fasts, and then like my method was alternate day fasting, and I was losing like 2 pounds a week. And then within 5 months, I'm back in the 140s, and it was great. And it just felt so easy. And then I couldn't fast anymore, and it became very stressful on my body. And so, my meals, I like to eat big meals and then fast for a long period of time. So while I couldn't really fast what I had intended on fasting, I go and I eat this massive meal with the intention of fasting for a long period. And then I hit, 18 hours or whatever, and then I become highly stressed. And so I go ahead and eat another really, really big meal. So while I could eat this 3,500 calorie meal, I could, alternate day fast and stretch that out. It kind of became like I was eating 7,000 calories in, 2 days. It's kind of how it measured out. Even though I didn't necessarily calculate, I just knew with the amount of fat that I was eating. So over time, I had put back on a lot of weight, and then it was April that I, again stepped on the scale and realized that I had creeped back up to 175. And along with that came a whole heap of other problems. And I went to the doctor, and she told me that either I needed to go have physical therapy or I was at risk of surgery. And it just hit me like a ton of bricks. Like, this is not my future. And what have I been doing? Like, where did I really go wrong in? Because I feel like when I set my mind to something, I can do it. But where did I go wrong? What was it that has caused me to have success and then immediately erase all that success? And now I'm here. And then I remembered Sean Baker and his video on Joe Rogan. And I was like, I think I'm going to go back and watch that video. And then I remembered Kelly Hogan. And I was like, I remember, watching her back in 2018 when I had originally tried Dirty Carnivore. And then I'm thinking, man, I need to get to the basics. I need to get to the basics of my health. Stop trying to biohack my fat cells and, trying to manipulate my scale and lose weight as quickly as I can. I really need to go back to the basics of my health. And that's where I started. And so I just said, all right, if I end up, having a really hard time with this because I was so addicted to those artificial sweeteners and cheese, I don't know what else to do. And thankfully, because my intention was to just eat beef, keep it super simple. Don't get sucked into all these different videos that are out there on YouTube. One person's going to say this, another person's going to say that. Just stick to the people who are tried and true. Their message has been the same, and just keep it simple and go from there and take it one day at a time. And that's what I did. And so I just started with beef patties, and for that day, I didn't have any artificial sweeteners or cheese. Next day, same thing. I just had beef patties, didn't have any artificial sweeteners or cheese. So it was interesting because I was thinking that I was really going to set myself up because I was really going to crave sugar. I didn't crave sugars. So the eating part became really easy at that point. And I think it's finally because, I don't know, maybe I had come from a completely different place, and it really wasn't about what I weighed. It ultimately was about, all right, I'm going to put my trust in this process that this is going to fix what's going on with my body at this point, because I don't know how I keep getting here. And ultimately, through that, I went through a little bit of a weird stage where, for a little over a week, I was super fatigued, really, really tired. And then once I got through that, it was like increased energy, just so much more energy. And every day has just really been the intention of healing my body. And ultimately, that's pretty much what has gone on is I have slight improvements every single day. And I eat a lot of beef. I eat a lot of beef. I eat venison. I eat elk. I eat some pork from time to time, and I'll incorporate some eggs. But other than that, and then of course fat that I render, or fat off of fatty cuts. But that's pretty much it. And every day I look forward to eating that. I don't think about what I can't eat. That's not even a thought process anymore. I don't think about snacking. And that's a new thing for me too, because, and my boyfriend the other day, he goes, I just realized, you're not at the fridge. Like, you don't snack anymore. And he's like, I barely even see you eat anymore, but I do. It's because I have like one meal, mostly one meal a day, or I'll have two meals. But for the most part, it's just one meal. And then I'm like so satiated. And it's not because I have an intention that I need to fill this empty pit in my stomach and bear through it because I want to lose weight. I don't even want to think about eating right now because I'm still pretty satiated. But when the hunger comes, it does come pretty quick, because I can be completely satisfied, and then 24 hours in, still completely satisfied, and then an hour goes by and I'm like so hungry. I gotta eat right now. So it's very interesting that way. And I feel it more like on a stress level versus a hunger pain, like that emptiness in your stomach.
I totally know what you mean.
Yeah. Yeah. So this time it really has been more, and I really got to emphasize when I say this, in my 20 plus years of being in the fitness industry, for the first time, this is about the process, not the end result. Every day it is about how am I going to feel today? And I'm so excited that I get to eat what I absolutely love, and all it's going to do is contribute to better health.
Well, let's get into the huntress part of you. I want to know, when did you first start to hunt? How old were you?
Well, when I first got my hunter safety license, I was 15 years old. So, and in the state that I live in, when you pass the hunter safety, then you have your wild ID for life. So you don't have to renew it. You don't have to retest for it over, a certain amount. And in fact, if you're even born before a certain year, you can hunt without the license. So I didn't start hunting until I didn't harvest my first animal until 2017. I was introduced more to hunting when I first got together with my boyfriend. He's an avid hunter, and he's been hunting for over 35 years, and it's a huge passion of his. And so when I was around it and saw it, I really saw it, and it was an eye opener for me, because this moment, as I'm hearing him talking about the deer and talking about the trail cams and talking about, just all the nuances of, scouting and finding the deer that you want to harvest and paying attention to the nuances. Like I didn't understand any of it. I was just like, oh, okay, great. So it wasn't until the morning, the first morning that I watched him take a deer for the first time. My initial response to that was very interesting, because I just had this overwhelming sense of compassion watching an animal die. It was, my first reaction, honestly, was how cruel. And it didn't come together for me until, and again, that reaction was coming from a major place of unawareness. I didn't, that was just an emotional reaction because I'm an animal lover. And so as I started realizing, okay, so where do we go from here? And he had me become part of the whole process. And I didn't realize that for a lot of hunters, it's very much a ceremonial type of practice, because it's the kill is the very last part. There's so much involved in it, and so many hunters have the utmost respect for wildlife, and it's about conservation, and animals need space to thrive. They need shelter, they need food, they need water, they need space to thrive in a habitat. And so part of hunting is making sure that as the new babies come up, that they do have that space, to thrive in a habitat, to promote good genes in their gene pool. So I became extremely interested in the whole process of dressing in the field, gutting it and skinning it and butchering it, and then of course eating it. And so that was my introduction into the hunting world. And it took a few years of him inviting me on his Montana trips, and he ended up drawing a very special tag in 2015, which at that time I was just like, oh no, you go. If I had known today, or if I had known then what I know today, I would have been all over that opportunity just to be part of that hunt with him. But, you know, at the time I wasn't, until 2016 that I decided to go with him on a Montana hunt. And just the whole experience in and of itself, and how much work is involved in this whole process. And there's a lot of work, there's a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of blood, sweat, tears, for everything to go down without a hitch and ethically. And then, you know, when it's over, it's over. And then you have the memories. And I really felt like that experience for me was pretty superior, because I got to spend a lot of time in the wild and observing their behaviors and watching them, and just becoming really enamored by uh, the rut, and watching what was happening during the rut. And you know, you'll watch a buck completely throw down with another buck, and then a doe goes by that's obviously an estrus, and they're done. That's it. Like, they're done fighting, and then they're chasing this doe. And watching them with this interaction, it's just really cool, because they're communicating with one another, and it's just such an interesting thing to witness, and for hours at a time just to watch, and from the sidelines, and it's just such a cool experience. So that caused me to kind of open up my eyes a lot more, and then I started reading a lot more on what is conservation. And you know, what I was educating myself on was really our history of conservation. And you know, a lot of hunters don't just throw out stuff like the Pittman-Robertson Act and what that means to hunting and conservation. And so I started learning about that.
Okay, so as like a carnivore, a lot of us, and me included, I mean, we are so far removed from where our food comes from. What is your thoughts on that? Because like, there are carnivores who are hunters. There are, absolutely. But I think a large majority of us, you know, we eat meat, we go to the store to get meat, or we go to a farm and, you know, source some meat. You have an opinion on that. What is your...
I do. Well, from experience, you know, when I was a competitor, I was at the store all the time, in the meat section all the time. And for me, it was price per pound. You know, I wanted the skinless chicken breast because I wanted the most amount of protein. And that's how I shot. Not once did I ever associate the chickens. I never thought about the life of the animal. You know, for me, it was just the end result, how it was packaged, how much it's going to cost, how much, you know, how much meat is this going to get me until the next time I have to go to the grocery store. And that's, you know, that was, I don't want to say sad reality, but that is a reality. Now, being a huntress, I am way more aware of where my meat comes from. And I do believe that for example, when we go to restaurants, who just sits down at their table and when their steak arrives, they think about that cow? Or when their burger arrives, no, they're thinking about getting my belly. Oh, this is going to taste so good. You know what I mean? We're thinking about our palate. We're thinking about, you know, probably the price and was it worth it? But we don't really think about the life of the animal. And that is very much a big part of what brought that steak to your table. Is there was an animal that had to live. It was raised, hopefully in a humane manner. Unfortunately, in other manners, no, not so much. And that's kind of the one thing that I do fight against, is I choose not to support factory farming. I don't think that it is a good thing at all for animals to be cooped up and not given the space that they need, and pumped with a bunch of antibiotics and hormones. And it is a really sad reality. And that type of meat, I don't even find would be good quality meat, specifically because when you're stressing out the animal, that animal is not going to produce very good vitamins,
very true,
mineral profile. So happy cows if they're in a pasture raised. I mean, you know, for example, my friends here on the island that raise Wagyu, these are the happiest cows. I mean, they live their entire lives in the pasture up until the last 2 days, where they're basically in a hay pen to segregate them from the rest of the herd for 2 days, and it's usually, you know, 3 to 5 at a time, but still a lot of space, and they get a lot of hay. But they're with their herds in the pastures all the way up until pretty much slaughter. And so, you know, they live very, very happy lives. They can roam free. You know, they're not being injected with hormones or antibiotics or manipulated, you know, to grow larger in a shorter amount of time. And every single harvest that I get is just phenomenal. I mean, extremely phenomenal tasting. The quality is just beautiful. So to kind of go back to what we were talking about, you know, associating the animal with the food. When I started hunting, my awareness became so profound that it really started the journey of nose to tail with me, because I understood the importance that there's a lot more to the animal than just, you know, the meats and the cuts and the burger, and utilizing as much as I can, not only for sustainable health, but really out of respect for the animal as well. And I understand that for some people it's a little ridiculous to name the animals because you're going to kill it. That's an emotional response. I think I do, and I nickname the deer mostly because of their behaviors, or basically just to separate that deer apart from the other deer, right? And so when I harvest that deer that I've named and I go to pull the meat out of the freezer, before I eat, I can say thank you. And so I know exactly what animal I'm thanking. And some people do that, some people don't. That's just for me. And I don't think that that's, you know, right or wrong, good or bad, either way. But I do believe that for anyone that just has more of an awareness that the animal did live at one point, it lived hopefully a very good life. It does create, I think, a more stronger response to the meals, and knowing that that meal is there to sustain you and provide you with, you know, nutrition, versus just here's a burger on the plate and that's going to fill your stomach and now you get to move on with life. I get to eat off that animal for the next 6 months. And, you know, I'm thankful for that. And there's nothing wrong with, you know, having the gratitude and showing the gratitude and, you know, demonstrating a bit more gratitude when you eat.
So you're saying that there is, in fact, a possibility for you to be an animal lover and a hunter at the same time, and a carnivore.
Most hunters are animal lovers. They have dogs that go with them on all their hunting trips. Their animals are very much their family members. And yes, you know, before I shot my first deer, I really struggled with that, and I had some dreams about it, because I think what people associate with how can you love animals and kill animals is that you're somehow causing suffering to those animals, when in actuality what you're doing is you're ending the life much quicker than anything in the wild would end that life. Either it's going to get hit by a car and suffer for a while, or it's going to get eaten alive by an apex predator.
Which is worse.
It is. I can't watch those videos. If I see something like that pop up, it kills my vibe more than anything. I need to just shut the internet down for a while, because
it's brutal.
It is. It's really hard to see, but that's very much
that's the wild. It's life. Yes.
It's brutal. It's very brutal. So For me, I have to make sure that before I pull that trigger, I am 100% confident in taking that shot. If I'm not, I'll pass up. And if I pass up and that's my opportunity, then oh well, it is what it is. But I will not take a shot on an animal that I'm not completely confident in, because that is highly unethical in my opinion. Um, for me, right? So
I agree with you
when
100%.
when I yeah when I got my first license in 2017, and I had anticipated on shooting my first deer, I lamented quite a bit on making sure that when I took that shot, that it was a perfect kill shot. And I went into it with like, oh, I every time I shoot it has to be, an instant kill shot. Well, yes, we all have that intention, obviously, but sometimes that's not the way that it
Yeah.
goes, and that's a very hard thing to swallow, and you do feel like the worst person in the world, because the last thing you want to do is cause harm or suffering to an animal. There's a huge silver lining there when it comes to people's understanding of hunting and those that are just wanting to hurt animals, because uh, causing an animal to suffer is way different than harvesting an animal to feed your family and contribute to wildlife management. And I wish that more people would um, watch some hunting shows before they made that judgment, or read a little bit more on what conservation is before making that judgment. Because most of us, and maybe it is because of our love of animals that causes most hunters to spend thousands of dollars of high-tech equipment to make sure that it's an ethical
Yeah.
shot, or to understand the amount of hours that's in it, practicing and practice, especially for bow hunters. Bow hunters have to practice and practice and practice before their season starts to make sure that when they make that poke, it's an ethical poke. And so many things can go wrong. And, you know, there's just so much involved in that entire process that those that don't understand hunting, they don't even, they're just so unaware of how much is actually involved for that
Mm-hmm.
for that 1 second shot.
Yeah.
The amount of hours, time, money involved leading up to that one shot that literally takes 1 second to end the entire hunt. And when, especially for bow hunters who have the most coolest experience getting so close within range of these wild animals, one of these days, I would love to be a bow hunter when time allows that I can practice. The amount of time that I would need to practice to execute, a shot with a bow. But for them to hike into the super rugged country and get so close with everything in the element working against you. It could be rain, it could be wind, it could be stepping on a twig, and then the next thing you know, that was your shot. And it could be a tag that you've been putting in for 20 years, and then that's it, it's done. There's so many highs and lows involved in the entire process. But when you get to execute on something like that and it goes down, and you get to harvest that animal, I mean, that's a memory. That is a memory that no one can ever take away from you. And when you can harvest your own meal, that strong awareness of this was a live animal, you become part of the aftermath of that animal's life. It's all in your control, that you get to break that animal down, use its hide, use its bone, use its organs, use its meat. And that animal did not die in vain. It didn't die in the winter. It didn't get eaten alive by an apex predator. It didn't succumb to disease. So, and then the hunter has probably, one of the best memories that they get to keep with them for many years. And we do live in those moments because they are so special. And I feel that that's what keeps a lot of us grounded, is being out in the nature and with the wildlife and studying their behaviors. Because you do, if you want to be a successful hunter, there's so much time involved in scouting and studying their behaviors. And so I was watching this episode of Live to Hunt, and it took, I think it was like 4 years in the making of Cody actually harvesting this animal.
Whoa.
And his story on how it all went down, and his history with this one specific deer completely embodies what it really is like to successfully harvest a deer that you've invested so much time into, and for it to actually happen. He'll never forget that. In fact, I'm sure his grandkids will be telling that story. And things in life can never take away from that joy, that moment, that level of true raw appreciation that you have for respect for the land, respect for the wild, and then, respect for your body and how you feed your body with this amazing organic meat that is extremely nutritious and very delicious.
Yeah, my two boys, my husband and son, are avid hunters, and my son, oh my goodness, that boy, he does not come back from a hunt rarely without getting something. He's a darn good shot, but he practices a lot, and this is his passion. That's what he does. He's a bow hunter, as you know. And I'm going to tell you, I have seen the whole process. I don't hunt, but I live it. Let me tell you, from when they very start planning their next trip until they, get their equipment, and they're doing, elk calls, and they're, trying out different equipment and different boots, and they're searching on the mountain. They have topographical type, maps, and they're looking and seeing where they're going to place their camp and where they're going to scout. And holy cow, it's a process. And I'm exhausted just hearing about it. And then when they come home, oh my, you hear about this. And my son's one that does the whole stalking. He gets as close as he can. And he talks about these stories that he's so close that it's crazy, but he couldn't get a shot because he was too close. And so, all these crazy stories. But that's like their passion, and they love animals. They absolutely do. So, to equate hunters with being cruel is not true. Not that you don't have jerks. You're always going to have jerks, no matter, I don't care what you're dealing
with. And they are. And they're out there. And those, generally are, poachers. Poachers don't have respect for the wildlife. I don't find that they're animal lovers at all. Because if they were, they would never desecrate an animal. Or disrespect wildlife. Wildlife belong here just as much as we do. And if we didn't have hunters, how would they be managed? And you would see a lot more disease. You would see way more animals getting hit by cars. You would see a lot more migratory animals, trying to find a strong habitat, and they end up in habitats that they won't thrive in because they don't have either the food sources or the water sources that they need. So, I think that hunters play one of the biggest roles in wildlife management and in helping the populations truly thrive. So it is essential that that hunters are here, because you can't leave it up to the Fish and Game Department entirely to manage these habitats. It's just not realistic. They wouldn't have the manpower or the resources to do that. I'm not a biologist, but what I do know is that every single hunter that buys a license is contributing to a lot of resources for the Wildlife Fish and Game Department, for them to do what they need to do to monitor, study, and help us learn more about the species and where they migrate to, and relocating animals so that they can build a stronger population in certain areas. So, we do leave it to the scientists to help with that part in our ecosystem, but hunters play a very, very big role in conservation. And every ethical hunter that you meet is an animal lover, because they do care about the life of the animal. They do care about an ethical kill. They do care about proper field dressing, and they care about making sure that the animals thrive. So, it's also fun. It's fun to watch animals thrive in their habitat, um, especially in larger groups. It is absolutely magnificent to watch a herd of elk, 150, 200 elk, crossing land and highways, and it is just, it's awe-inspiring, because they're such majestic animals, and to watch them in such strong herds like that shows that they're thriving. And they're just awesome animals, especially during the rut, when you hear a lot of the bugling and the cow calling, and watching their behaviors. And you don't have to be a hunter to get out there and enjoy that process. I'm sure a lot of people prefer, you shoot them with camera, not with a gun. I know there's quite a few of them out there too, and bless them. It's because of them that we end up with some of the most amazing wildlife shots across our screens, right? And I think it's super cool. So
Yeah, I'm definitely,
wildlife is there for everyone to enjoy.
I could get into that. I just wouldn't want to be doing all the hiking up a mountain thing like what my boys did in Colorado. No, that did not sound like fun to me. I'm like, I don't get this. How is this fun to y'all? But yeah,
when you're there and you're in the moment, you don't think about that incline. Your adrenaline is driving at that point, and your body just becomes the back seat. Because if you have that opportunity, you're going to get to your animal. And I went on a bear hunt 3 years ago, and where we were is an extremely rugged country, and you really have to be in shape to climb up these mountains. And when we put our stock on this bear, it was a day and a half in the making. And when I finally got to a position to be able to climb up to him, you're in the moment, you're aware, making sure you don't roll your ankles or you don't slide or anything like that. But your focus is getting to that animal and getting set up with an ethical shot. And you're just not thinking about how much your body aches, or, oh my gosh, how much longer? You know what I mean? Like your brain is on adrenaline alone. And so it's funny how the body can just take a back seat to that and just do what it needs to do to get there. And then when it all comes together, it's just such a gift that you don't want to pass up. And even if you don't get to make the shot, to get there and to have put in all that hard work, it makes it worth it every year. And I know a lot of people that draw special tags that they've been putting in for years, decades, and they don't get to harvest. They go out on their hunt, and they either have opportunities or they don't. But it's not for nothing, because when you're out there and you're part of the whole experience, that shot is like I said before, it's 1 second, then it's done, it's over with. But the hunt really is about being in the elements and challenging yourself and calming down and quieting down and being in the present moment. There's never in my life and in my experience, there's never been any other period in my life where I am 100% in the present moment for such a long period of time. And I think that's why so many hunters, they really thrive on that process, because it's so therapeutic to come back to the real world, having had all that time just being in the present moment. And it really is such a gift. And that's ultimately what I really look forward to, is being in the wild and watching them and putting a stock and taking the time in that stock. And allowing things in the moment to unfold the way that, the universe kind of unfolds everything in front of you. And sometimes it is the most amazing, truly amazing experience with a success at the end, or it's just a really, truly amazing experience and you went home empty-handed. Either way, the experience
Yep.
is still there. And you
I
can't
think my
take that
boys would
away.
agree with that. My boys would definitely agree. Now, I just told you they got back from Colorado, I don't
Mhm.
know, 3, 4 weeks ago, whatever it was. And my son got a cow milk. He also put in for a bear tag, and he was
Mhm.
really excited about that. But after getting that cow and hauling it off the mountain and everything, he was kind of like, I'm kind of done now. But he was really looking forward to maybe getting a bear, and he actually had the opportunity to do that. He knew where the
Mhm.
bear was. He was going to go back and, stalk the bear again or whatever. But he just decided after everything was all done, he was done. I want to know a little bit about the bear hunt. Just
Mhm.
talk a little bit about how that went, and if you actually got one, and if you
Mhm.
did, what does bear meat taste like?
Bear meat's my favorite. Bear meat is my favorite.
Really?
Yes, it is so tasty. And we make bear sausage out of
Oh.
bear. And oh my gosh, it is just it's the best. And a lot of bear hunters will tell you the same thing. Um,
Hmm.
so yes, we did. Both of us actually got bear, and both of us
Oh.
got mature boars because that's what we were going after. We didn't want to hunt sows. Um, so our goal is to go after a mature bear, primarily because it's really about managing the population and predator control because the boars will eat the cubs. So if there is a sow that boar wants to procreate with, it will eat the cubs, and that is
Dang.
just a really sad reality in the wild. But I mean, that's what happens. So and it's I don't know if it's taken out another bear's gene pool or what. I really don't know why, but that is typically a part of that process. So that's probably one of the biggest reasons why sows are so aggressive, is because they don't want their cubs eaten, but naturally they're very aggressive. Even when you see sows mating with boars, you'll see they're very aggressive. It's a very interesting thing to watch if you've never seen two two bears going at it. I highly
I can't
recommend
say
looking
I
it up.
have.
It's a weird thing. There's a lot of passion, and the sow is usually the more of the aggressor. Um, but bear, so the whole experience was we were out in this place called Hell's Canyon, and there's no service. So you're in highly rugged country, and we're on a jet boat, kind of going up and down until we can blast the top of these mountains and see if there's a bear, and then get within range to determine the species, whether or not it's a sow or a boar, and if it is a boar, is it old enough? So there's a lot that's involved in making your stock on an animal, and I was fortunate enough that was my first bear hunt, and it's been my only bear hunt. But I successfully, and I took a pretty long shot at a steep angle, and it was a perfect shot. I mean, it was through, and it was a very interesting hunt because when we had climbed, it took me almost 3 hours just to even climb. So we had spotted him the day before, about a mile away. We were up on one ridge and we saw him milling in another, but there was also across the drainage, there was a sow and two cubs. So we're like, okay, that would be really good for to try and go after. But we had to wait until the next morning because we would have lost daylight by the time we saw him. So it was the next morning we went to the bottom, the riverbed where we had seen him, and sure enough, he was much further up, but he was still there. So that's when we decided to put our stock on him, and it was I'd say a 40% incline all the way up, and it was hard. It was hard to get there, but it all happened so fast because when we got there, we got set up really, really quickly, and things are happening really fast. And, when I got my crosshairs on him, I mean, I wasted no time and took the shot, uh, and it was complete through double long shot, and he stood there for just a second and then dropped. And what was so interesting about this is that there was a big boulder beneath him, and he ended up rolling into this boulder, which catapulted him in the air. And so he did these double flips, and then when he rolled down, he rolled right past us and just kept rolling and
Oh
rolling.
my God.
We got it all on video. It was just extremely amazing to see. But he obviously he was dead before he even hit that boulder. But it was just something to add to the whole experience. Like, whoa, because we were with a guy, and the guy's like, I've never seen that happen ever before, and it was, I was still just completely stunned, and just that whole experience. And I remember on the climb down, got to the bottom of the trail, which, after that time, it was probably about 2 hours later, the adrenaline finally wore off, and I realized what I had done and what I had put into this for it to actually become successful. So many people can get to that opportunity if they even choose to take it that far, and then might not even get a successful shot. So not only did I, climb up and give everything that I got to get to where he was and get set up and take a shot, it was a completely ethical, perfect kill shot. Is like, it was amazing. It was so amazing. And that amount of awareness just completely overwhelmed me. And I just started crying. And I was in so much gratitude that, it was all, it just all happened, exactly how you would hope it all had happened. And of course, we took everything. I had a shoulder mount made out of them, and we used all the meat. And, my boyfriend got his, which we turned into a beautiful rug. And we enjoyed bear for about a year. So
Nice.
it was great. It was
So before
definitely.
you took the shot, did you have what they call buck fever? The
So I'm glad you mentioned that, because I said earlier that it happened so fast. I got set up, and then as soon as I had my crosshairs on him, I took the shot, because that's what happens when you get what they call buck fever. Your adrenaline becomes so profound that you cannot control your body. You can't control your breathing, and then you're shaky, and then you psych yourself out. And because I had worked so hard getting to him, I knew it had to happen fast, because I didn't want to give myself an opportunity. I had another opportunity on a mule deer the next year, and the mule deer that I had, he was so far away that there was a lot of time that was involved that caused me to not be able to control my breathing. And my boyfriend was like, you got to take your eye off of him. You just got to, I'll watch him. He's bedded down, he's not going anywhere. And yeah, buck fever is a very real thing. And a lot of that is because you have way too much time, and you're so excited because, it's all going to happen. And sometimes you don't get to do it right away. And this is so crazy for bow hunters, and people don't even acknowledge this. Like, from a rifle, I mean, you have some time, you've got some distance. But when, for a bow hunter, let's say you've got your target animal bedded underneath a tree, and you don't have a shot, because most of the time you want to wait until it stands up, because then it's a perfect vital shot. But they're in one position for hours sometimes. Think about that. Think about all those yogis out there, that are in this intense position. Add adrenaline to that, and then add stiff muscles to that. And, there's so much involved in that process that, it can either happen. That's why when when stuff like that happens, it just makes your experience on such a more profound level. Like non-hunters can't even identify with, like, they can hear people talk about it, but I don't think until you're truly there and you're truly in that experience to really know what all went into this moment, especially for some bow hunters. I mean, your close proximity and even just the slightest move can end it right then and there. And so all that hard work could be for nothing. So you have to work with what you have, and the elements can change and you have to adapt to that change. And some of them, to even get really close, you're barefoot, so you don't even have any
My
protection.
son does that.
Yeah, and you work with your element, and it really comes down to a lot of skill, a lot of patience. We're not mountain lions. We're not, we don't have the patience inside of us like mountain lions do, right? But sometimes you have to just sit there. And for me, I was half in a drainage, so I'm, trying to prop my body up while, keeping my scope, keeping him in my crosshairs. He's a like 700 yards, and I'm not going to take a shot that far. I had to wait until he came in around 400 yards, and then I took my shot. But this was a big mule deer. Like I said, my boyfriend's been hunting for 35 years, and he's never even shot a mule deer this big before. So, he's very much a part of the whole thing too. It was so exciting for him, and he really helped me a lot, and helped me just focus on your breathing, because when you have all that time is your enemy, honestly. It
That
can
is
be
so
your
crazy.
enemy. Yes, it
Yeah, I
is.
hear about this all the time. And my daughter, the first time she shot a deer, she had that, severe buck fever and she just shook
Yeah.
afterwards. It was the
Oh,
cutest
yeah.
thing.
Oh, yeah. The amount of adrenaline that's going through you. And that's the other thing about hunting, too, is that everything can be calm, just so calm. And within 1 second, your body is just dumping large amounts of adrenaline that, life doesn't really give you those experiences either, and that can happen several times throughout a hunt. And that's also something that we really live for too, is just that, that dead quiet, and then all of a sudden just this massive adrenaline dump. And it can be because there was a squirrel, or it could be because a doe came running out and you're waiting to see a buck running behind her, and then it's like nothing. you know but it's part of the process, and it's a lot of fun, and it's exciting, and it keeps you um just super motivated and focused on why you're there.
That's awesome. Okay, before we go, yeah, oh wow. Yeah. So I want to know what it was your most exciting and challenging hunt. Was it the bear hunt or another hunt?
I would say the bear hunt was definitely exciting and challenging, and my mule deer was also extremely exciting and challenging. But I'm going to go back to my very first hunt, because
Mm.
while I relied on my boyfriend to pretty much be my guide and tell me everything that I needed to know, I never had anticipated shooting a deer without him. And so when the season started, it was 12 days of no success. And then, the morning that I shot him, he had to go to work, and he said, "Well, I got to go to work today, but if you shoot one, just call me and I'll come home." And I was like, "What do you mean? If I'm not going to shoot one if you're not here? Like, what do you mean?" And so he was, showing me the shotgun, just going through it all over again, and making sure that, I knew what I was doing. And I'm just, kind of half-heartedly listening, but in the back of my head, I'm thinking, well, it ain't gonna happen. You know what I mean? And so no, I say it's probably about an hour, maybe an hour later, was when I saw a doe come into the property. And where we live, we have a lot of land, and so we do have the opportunity to hunt blacktail here. And so I had stepped outside, and I was contemplating, going into the blind, and not really with an intention to, honestly. But then a doe came out and I was like, oh, she's small. She's not going to have anything with her. And sure enough, the first buck I seen, and it was on. And it was at that moment that I felt like I made it. I became a huntress because I knew right then and there that I wasn't doing it for him, that I was doing this for me, because it was either this is my opportunity. And I felt like it was a true testament to why I was doing it. And while he had been encouraging me and whatnot, I ultimately I felt like this was kind of a thing, a couples thing. And I needed him for some reason to help me through this. And I faced it myself, and I made the decision myself, and I remembered everything that he had told me, and I grabbed the shotgun and I got set up, and I was able to get a perfect shot, and he died within 5 seconds, and it was executed flawlessly. And I remember each time I was taking a step to get into position, I could feel my feet underneath me just shaking because of the amount of adrenaline that was going through me. But through that process, my awareness was to go through the checklist and make sure that I was, crossing every T and dotting every I. And the fear of being by myself was gone. And I knew that I had it in me, and I knew that I wanted to do this for myself. And I'll never forget that day. I'll never forget that deer, and I'll never forget how I felt afterward, and calling him up and, hyperventilating, and he's like, what's going on? And he was also surprised as well that I took the shot by myself, and that I went down flawlessly. And he came home and took pictures and dressed him,
So did you dress
and
him?
yes, I
Okay.
helped. I
Okay.
helped.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm very much part of that whole process. And proper field dressing is also very essential, and they teach you this in hunter safety, of the importance of proper field dressing, and you don't want any of that meat to spoil. So harvesting the organs, and skinning the hide, and proper, hanging, letting it hang and dry out for a little bit before we butcher, and then breaking it down, and then trimming it, and then processing it, and then
It's a lot of work. I've
putting it in the
seen
freezer. Oh
a
my
lot of
gosh,
work.
it is so much work. It is so much work.
So much work.
Yes, but again, being part of that process also keeps you so much more appreciative for each meal, because of the amount of work that goes into it, and knowing that none of these animals died in vain. They lived its purpose, they did its part in the ecosystem, and it went out without knowing what happened. Wasn't running from, no hunter is going to just chase down an animal. No hunter could even catch an animal. You know what I mean? So this animal has no idea what's even happening. And even if, say, for a bow hunter, because they do get in very, very close proximity, they might have a stunned animal that's like, I don't know what you are, but they're not afraid. If an animal is afraid, they are
They're
gonna
gone.
hightail and they're gone. That's their instincts. But if they're confused, they might stop and stare, but they're not in fear. So I think that that's also another really big misconception of hunters, that, they're putting all this fear in animals, and it's cruel, and it's like, well, this animal has no idea what's going on. You know what I mean? An animal getting hit by a car, and then having, to live through that for who knows how long before it finally expires. Now that's totally cruel.
Yeah.
And when certain areas are not managed properly, you have a lot more deer that, they're being pushed out, they're running in the streets, or they get very comfortable with where they are, because a lot of people treat them like pets.
Yeah.
And so they lose a lot of their survival instincts. And
True story.
yeah, and we see it, we see it in certain areas. And where we live, we have, a lot of uh, areas on this island that are heavily populated, and they congregate there because they know there's no hunting pressure. They're safe and they're fed. So I I think that's unfortunately a disservice, because then they're going to end up
Mhm.
becoming overpopulated, and then they're more prone to disease. And that's a very, very sad thing. I don't know if anyone has ever looked up chronic waste disease or blue tongue, and what happens to these beautiful creatures when they're hit with these diseases. It's horrible. It's absolutely horrible. And
Yeah, that's so much goes into it that people just have no clue. And,
true.
I guess I'm lucky enough to be around it pretty much my whole entire life, even when I was
Hmm.
a little kid. Not that I've ever done it or probably never will, but,
And that's fine.
it's,
And that's totally, yeah, not everyone is a hunter,
yeah.
that not everyone that understands it or respects it has to pull the trigger. And we get that. We understand
I
that.
cook it. I cook it.
And you probably also appreciate it,
Oh, I very much do. Yes.
because it's good quality, and you know that it was a lot of hard work going out and getting that
Mhm.
animal. And we grew up on that. That's
Mhm.
how people originally were able to feed themselves, is by sourcing from the land themselves.
Mhm.
and
Absolutely.
and it's kind of ludicrous to think that it's more humane to go to the grocery store and buy packaged meat than it is to go out and kill an animal yourself. And I think that those people that feel that way, I encourage you to please pick up a book and understand the
Yep.
tradition behind hunting and what hunting truly is, and how it directly correlates with conservation, and how those hunters help all public land owners get to enjoy wildlife.
I love it. That's a perfect ending too, because we were like way over, but that's okay. It was
Okay.
good stuff. I'm sure my son is going to appreciate this episode. So thank you so much, Jeanette, for joining me, and we will have to get together and talk again soon.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. This was a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Bye, Jeanette.
Bye bye.